Eric Galluzzo won first place in our fall 2025 composing competition, and his prize was a recording of a live studio orchestra thanks to Cinemagic scoring in Cape Town, South Africa. After the recording session, I met with Eric to hear all about what it's like working with a remote orchestra. He shared tips for preparing for a big orchestral session, his experience recording from thousands of miles away, and even some advice for other composers on how to have a better shot in a composing competition. The very first place winner by a lot, we have Jungle Hunt from Eric Galluzzo. So congratulations, Eric. First of all, congratulations on winning the competition.
Thanks.
And congratulations on the prize.
Yeah, it was really amazing, I have to say. They went all out.
What is it like to work with a remote orchestra?
I've had like amateur orchestras play stuff. I've had professional chamber groups play my music, but I have never had a professional orchestra play my music, and I've also never done an orchestral recording session, like a cinematic recording session. You know what I mean?
So it was a new.
It was. But I have to also give a shout out to Alex Christodoulou. I don't know how to pronounce his name. The guy who the guy who won.
He won the other recording.
Yes.
Right.
And he had some tips for me based on, his experiences, which I thought were which I thought were really great, and I used his experience as well.
Do you remember any of those tips?
I do.
What was some of Alex's cautionary advice?
Simplify the time signatures. Like, instead of using 10/8, which I had used in my original composition, sort of, two groups of three followed by two groups of 2/8 notes, he said, make it all 5/4, because I was switching between 10/8 and 5/4. He just said, make it all 5/4, use accents to clarify where the accented note should be, which was very helpful. And I did that. And in fact, there's only like one small little rough spot in the recording, which is where I didn't take that advice. And I had like 5/4 followed by 6/8, followed by 5/8, followed by 3/4, followed by 5/4. And it's at a very fast tempo, or it's not so much that the time signature is changing, it's that the beat is changing. So like when you go from 5/4 to 6/8, the beat changes from a quarter note to a dotted quarter note. And so the click changes, and then when you go to 5/8, it's just all over the place because they recorded it in sections, right? So it's even just hard to start on the right note, especially like when the first note of the measure is a rest. So so that was a little chaotic.
So what was step one, I guess, for the recording process?
Step one is I just sent them the score. And then over the course of about a month, maybe even over a month, John and I exchanged, John Walton, the music director, the conductor, who's actually also a composer. He and I exchanged a number of emails back and forth. He had some suggestions, like including the violins and the string section toward the beginning to even out the balance. I know he spent at least one full day looking at the score and making like a woodwind score, because they record in sections, right? Strings, winds, brass, and percussion. So he made a woodwind score, and I was like, you're going into a lot of trouble just for my, silly little piece. Said he said, my vision isn't what it used to be. And so I find it easier if I more or less memorize the music in advance. So that on the day I'm just sort of operating from memory, which was just outstanding. I mean, he
Okay.
really learned the music. I mean, you could
Right.
tell he during the sessions he knew it. A lot of the success on the day was due to his efforts. And John, it's funny, John, the conductor, after the fact, sent me a revised score after the session saying, "Hey, you know what? It occurred to me we should have just done it like this because 6 + 5 + 5 is 16, so just 2 bars of 4/4." And
Right. Yeah.
but me and my sort of purist,
Right.
concert music world
Your inner
mentality.
Stravinsky wanted the
Exactly. Yeah,
right.
Stravinsky would be proud. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So how involved were you? Were you just kind of a fly on the wall, or were you an active participant?
I was mostly a fly on the wall just because
Right.
John knew the music so well at
Right.
that point. There were a couple of times when I chimed in saying like, "Hey, flute two should or the piccolo should be playing flute right here."
Mm.
They had forgotten to change instruments, or clarifying what I wanted in certain areas. Like yes, damp the tam tam at the end.
Was there any other spots that came out a little differently than what you got used to with the Muse sounds?
Only in terms of maybe balance, and even then, like the mixing engineer did a great job in basically making it sound great. Like the bassoons were louder than I expected.
Mm.
Typically, like if you listen to bassoons in a concert hall, and there are basically any other instruments playing at all. You can't hear them. I
Right.
mean, not quite, but they're not loud. But they came out fairly loud in the mix. But I decided, you know what? They're supposed to be prominent there. Sounds great to
You
me.
wrote the part. Yeah.
I'll just leave it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also have to give a shout out to Murray, the mixing engineer, who,
Mm.
because we went back and we exchanged like, he sent me 5 copies or 5 different mixes. We went back and forth. Like I gave him comments 4 times on
Okay.
stuff, and he
Kept
just
working.
cheerfully addressed them every time.
Yeah.
And I will also say I am not a mixing engineer.
Mm.
And so I am terrible at mixing.
Right.
And after a while, I was like, this is good. Like you've addressed everything.
Right.
Like you've gone above and beyond the Call of Duty.
I assume that's the mix I'm hearing in the video. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. That sounds good. And the video. So they videoed it. That's pretty awesome
Yeah,
too, right?
indeed. And they even asked me for comments on the video
Wow.
too. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Nice.
wow. But yeah, I mean, the first draft they sent me was like this professionally edited, beautiful looking thing. It was just amazing. So
That's
yeah, I
great.
was very
Yeah.
happy.
I guess that car, it seems like it was so simple. It just worked.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say a lot of preparation in advance,
Mm.
both, me trying to orchestrate it as well as I could, and then especially John and Ferrell John, the clarinetist, offering their input, really just made it go much more smoothly on the day. And of course, like all of these people, like this is the Cape Town Philharmonic, so they're all consummate professional musicians, who are able to just sort of read stuff like that. um,
Yeah, sometimes I write something and I worry it's going to be hard, and then it just
yeah,
nothing.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
there was a bit in my piece exactly like that where there was these flurries of 16th notes. I'm like, oh, this is not going to be good. So I was even thinking in advance about like, okay, who do I have like not play during that so that it's just one player, and if they get the wrong notes, it doesn't matter, so that it isn't doubled. But they just flew right through it. There was no problem at all. I'm like, I couldn't sight read that. I can tell you
Right,
that.
right.
When I was writing this, uh, I don't know if anyone particularly noticed this, but I made the beginning like it was basically ABA, right? Sort of a large ternary, and so the A section was fairly simple. And then the B section had a lot of complexity, both in terms of the orchestration and the tonality. It was less tonal, still tone centers and stuff, but
Mm.
not as conventional, I guess you might say. And then I ended with a big, nice, big E major section.
Right.
I figured that, you know what? I don't know how this is going to go in advance. It, of course, in the end, it turned out great. But I figured if you start well and you end well, people will forget the bit in the middle if it didn't go so well.
Okay. Right.
So I kind of planned that in advance.
So the theme was Africa. I
Mhm.
was wondering if you did any research or studying.
I looked at that image, right? I actually just put it full screen on my screen and just sort of stared at it for a while. And then I figured out, okay, what do I see? What are the big parts? What are some small parts that I can highlight? Right. I did look into African music. I listened to like Kronos Quartet's Pieces of Africa, for example, which I'd heard a little bit of before, but I listened to the whole thing. What is particularly idiosyncratic for African music, right?
Right.
For example, major one, minor two, major one, instead of as a prolongation, instead of
Mhm.
1 5 1. You even still hear that in like gospel music, and it's sort of made it into R&B. And so I incorporated that a little bit into the A section of my piece, right? I also saw, well, okay, there's action, right? There's this hunter standing with a spear, and
Mhm.
so the B section is kind of all about the action. The A section is all about sort of setting the overall African scene.
Mhm.
And then, like, what instruments are characteristic? Well, flute and drums, of course, are very sort of stereotypically, at least, African. And then there's that big deer, deer spirit in the background. So I
Mhm.
wanted to incorporate that, and that was the section where with all the string harmonics, where it suddenly drops out.
So you
Mhm.
soaked in the image and kind of
Mhm.
thought of the different aspects.
Mhm.
You did some research,
Mhm.
and then what, you sat down and wrote a melody or what? What
Um,
came next?
well, yeah. So I always write on sheet music. So
Okay.
this is or I always
Old
write on
school.
manuscript paper,
Right.
right? The first thing I did is I thought about form, right?
Mm.
90 seconds is not a long time to work with.
I hear
Um,
that a lot.
yeah, yeah, but it's also very effective for a competition like this. So I think it's great. But it's also, an interesting challenge for a composer, right? I think it's an appropriate amount of time for one image, right? But you still have to think a lot about how can I tell a story in
Mhm.
90 seconds? And so what I did is I thought, okay, I'm going to have a quick introduction and then an ABA. Introduction sets the stage, right? Introduces some of the sounds I'm going to be using and instruments and harmony, and then I'll settle into my A. So as I mentioned, I had the A is fairly simple harmony, B is the more complex harmony, and then end with A. But this time it's in major, and so and much bigger orchestration, so it sounds really satisfying. Then I thought, okay, let me come up with a melody. So after listening to this African music, incorporating 1 2 1, I came up with a quick melody, and then I basically just wrote out the B section. I mean, there wasn't a lot to it, and it's funny because the melody actually did change after I wrote it down. Like the melody that I have on my paper is actually not quite the same as what ended up in the final track.
Do you do
And
that away from the piano or at the
yes,
piano? Yeah.
I
Okay.
my piano skills are terrible. I
Okay.
can barely play.
Probably encouraging for people who don't have piano chops, that you don't need masterful piano chops
Yeah,
to write.
write stuff on paper and then stick it in your notation program, and
Right.
then or DAW or whatever it is you're using, and then when it doesn't work, you fix it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have this idea that they have to go kind of bar one, bar two,
Oh,
like get bar two right, go to bar three, and it's really hard to instill in people like it's layers, and you can kind of go back
yeah.
and change it.
Oh, yeah. Well, like the introduction on this was like the last thing I wrote, I think.
Mm,
I also have to say one thing that John was great at is knowing when to say, okay, that's good enough.
mm, okay,
Because that, as a composer, of course, you want everything to be perfect, you
right.
know, but they have half an hour, right? These sessions are half an hour. And it's like
Wow.
after half an hour, they have other things to do. They are only paying the musicians for half an hour, right? And all that. So I'm assuming, I mean, so they want to make the most of that time. And so John was really great about saying, okay, yep. That's good. So in fact, on the video, at one point you see him going like this, which was at the end of one of the takes. He was like, "Yep, you nailed it. On to the next section."
I'm just thinking back that I recorded with a string quartet, and the first day was a disaster, and
Oh yeah,
I learned the second day we were much crisper, and
yeah.
I stayed up
That
the night, the middle night, like how am I gonna fix this?
Oh no. I've heard this from many composers is the first rehearsal is going to be a disaster or is
Right.
going to sound terrible. Just accept it. It
Right.
will. The second one will sound much better. And if it doesn't, then that's when you start giving your
Mm,
input about these are wrong notes and so forth.
right. That's good advice. Stay calm.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. Don't panic.
Thank you, Eric, for talking with me, and congratulations once again. And special thanks to Cinemagic Scoring for recording Eric's piece. If you're interested in their very affordable recording packages, check out cinemagicscoring.com. Without further ado, let's take a listen to the final result.